Now let's look at authentication mechanisms. So the most basic rudimentary form of authentication mechanism that's been around since 1980s is a password. So what you have is a combination of a username and password. Make sure you develop a robust password policy. When you design your security policy, password policy should be a subset of your security policy. And in that policy, you should dictate that you should have long passwords that change periodically, combination of upper and lowercase, alphanumeric, and special characters. And promote and facilitate the use of a password manager within your organization. Personally, I use 1Password, but you could use Dashlane or LastPass. And the whole idea with the password manager, if you're not familiar with password manager, it's a little application that you run on your Mac or PC or phone, and it's literally a password manager, meaning it keeps tabs of all of your usernames and passwords for different websites and different systems that you have access to, and the software generates a password for you. You don't have to keep using the same password with maybe few difference in characters, because if that password gets hacked, then people can get into and try the same password in different variations to break into different systems. With the password manager, on the other hand, each password could be completely unique, and you can make them. I have some passwords that are 30 digits long, 30 characters long password. I mean, that's an insanely strong password, and I possibly couldn't do it. Like if I just sat down and tried to figure it out on my own, no way, Jose. So password manager is an absolute lifesaver, and it's a worthwhile investment. You should do it at a personal level, but also as an organization, you should make that part of your security policy. And the next level to passwords, which has gained a lot of popularity over the past decade or so, is called multi-factor authentication. So for example, on your phone, before logging into Amazon or a website of your choice, you may have multi-factor authentication enabled, where they send you a security code, as you can see on your screen here, and you plug in that code into that website before typing in your password so you can gain access. Now, the idea is with multi-factor authentication, you have multiple pieces of information that you need to gain access to the system or a website. And another example that I can give you is piece one could be an ATM bank card. So bank gives you an ATM card, for example. So this is something you have. And piece number two could be the PIN number that you choose after you get your ATM card. This is something you know. So when you go to get cash from your bank, you'll go to the ATM machine, you'll put in your bank card, and after you put in the ATM card, it asks for a PIN code. You type in the PIN code and you're in. You can get cash, you can run different type of transactions. That's a form of multi-factor authentication. And the most common example is the one I gave you earlier, where you're logging into a website and they give you a security code because you gave them your phone number. Now, one thing to keep in mind with multi-factor authentication is unless you provide both pieces of information, you cannot get in. You must provide both pieces of information. It's also referred to as two-factor authentication or 2FA. Now, two-factor authentication means you only have two pieces of information required. Now, in the example of an ATM card, you have a physical card and then you have a PIN. That's two-factor authentication. But multi-factor authentication takes it to the next level. You may need additional pieces of information as well, beyond just two, to be able to gain access. And what you should do is make multi-factor authentication part of your security policy to promote a strong security posture within your organization. The third type of authentication mechanism is digital certificates. Digital certificates are analogous to a driver's license. And as you can see here on this picture that I have on the screen, a driver's license uniquely identifies an individual that has this license. So you may have multiple people with the same name, but they're completely unique based on different attributes, their date of birth, where they live, the color of their hair, their eyes, all that jazz. That collectively together uniquely identifies that individual. Now, similarly, digital certificate is an alternative form of credential used for the verification of identity. So computer systems use digital certificates to verify the identity. So for example, if there's a digital certificate on a server, it's to make sure that it's a legitimate server, not some rogue bad actor's machine in our environment, but a legitimate server installed by our corporation. And digital certificate is issued by a trusted certificate authority, and it leverages PKI or public key infrastructure. Now there's a lot there, so let me unpack one by one. First, trusted certificate authority. It could be either an internal certificate authority within our corporation, but most likely if it's a public-facing website, for example, let's say apple.com, you'll actually need a third-party trusted certificate authority, somebody like VeriSign. You can look them up on the internet. They actually publish digital certificates. So when you go to apple.com, and you see a padlock in your browser, you can click on it and you'll see that there's actually a digital certificate issued by VeriSign to apple.com. And there's a whole process that takes place using PKI, which is a public key infrastructure. And PKI uses asymmetric key encryption. And when I say asymmetric, that means it's a combination of public and private key. And most of the browsers are programmed with the trusted third-party certificate authority information to begin with. So that helps me identify that it's coming from a legitimate third-party certificate authority server. And then because I trust that, I also trust apple.com. It's a whole chain of trust system at the end of the day. And without getting into too much detail, at a CCNP level, we're going to go deep into this topic, but I'm just trying to keep it high level, trying to help you understand the concept here. Digital certificates are time sensitive and they can also be revoked. So you may have noticed if you have a corporate laptop, you have a certificate installed on it. Servers have certificates installed on them, and there is an expiration date. Typically around 5 years is an average from what I've seen. Some companies are more aggressive. You may see 3 years lifetime for a certificate. It just depends on your corporate security policy. And what you also have is the ability to revoke a digital certificate. So for example, if a corporate laptop is lost, an administrator can go ahead and revoke the certificate that was issued to that user on that machine. So if somebody tries to break into the company using a stolen laptop, a digital certificate is no longer trusted. Digital certificates are tough to manage, but provide very strong security. And the final type of authentication mechanism that I want to touch base on today is biometric security. So when I say biometric, different things probably come to your mind, but here we have a finger scanner. So we go ahead and put our finger on this finger scanner, and if our fingerprint matches, we are granted access to either a facility or to a system. It's a form of authentication that relies on users' biological attributes for providing access. So once again, things like fingerprint, face recognition, iris recognition, voice recognition, even weight. So where weight comes in handy is, let's say it's a very secure data center type facility and it's a multi-floor data center. So as somebody gets into an elevator and they're trying to get to the next floor, there could be a mechanism in place that checks that person's weight. And it has a certain threshold. Let's say if you're 165 pounds, what it looks at is if your weight dramatically changed. If you went from 165 to 265, that ain't right. It's going to refuse access. And there are many other examples, but this is just a subset of what biometric security can do. Now, the thing about biometric security is this is the ultimate form of security. Now, I'm going to admit it's not perfect. There is no such thing as perfect security, but it's pretty close to being perfect because every single human being is unique and all of our biological attributes make us super unique. However, the big thing is it can be very expensive to implement as a physical security mechanism. If you have thousands of sites and you have biometric security deployed everywhere, just the management of that system and maintenance of these biometric scanners and getting all of your employees in the database, all that entire system could be very complicated and very expensive to maintain. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.